France, the beating heart of Western Europe, stretches itself across a diverse and majestic landscape that is as varied in texture and temperament as its long and turbulent history. To understand France, the culture, the conflicts, the kingdoms, and the revolutions, we must first understand the land that bore them. For geography does not merely shape borders. It shapes civilizations, carves identities, and etches its will into the psyche of its people. And in France, geography is not just a backdrop. It is the first character in the story. From the soaring peaks of the Alps to the wide Atlantic coastline, from the windswept cliffs of Brittany to the lush vineyards of Burgundy, France presents itself not as a singular entity, but as a mosaic, a land where every region speaks with its own accent, grows its own harvest, and guards its own traditions. Yet, it is unified, not in its sameness, but in its embrace of difference. The very borders of France hold together a continent within a country. Let us begin in the east, where France meets the towering walls of the Alps. Here, the land rises sharply, defying both the plains and the skies, culminating in Mont Blanc, Western Europe's highest mountain. At 4,810 meters, Mont Blanc is more than a geological monument. It is a symbol of resilience and grandeur. The Alpine region defines much of France's southeastern frontier, forming a natural barrier between France and Italy and influencing the political dynamics of Europe for centuries. These mountains, though imposing, have never fully divided the people. Instead, they created zones of exchange, of smuggling, of trade, of resistance. Mountain passes like the Col du Mont Cenis and Col de l'Isère have for centuries served as corridors through which armies, ideas, and goods have flowed. As the Alps descend westward, they give way to the Rhône Valley, a long and fertile corridor that channels not only the Rhône River but also the culture and commerce of southern Europe into the heart of France. The river itself begins high in the Swiss Alps and cuts through southeastern France, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea near Camargue, a coastal delta teeming with wildlife and marked by wide salt flats and wild horses. The Rhône is not just a body of water, it is a cultural highway. Ancient Greek and Roman traders once navigated its currents. Medieval pilgrims followed its course. Even today, its vineyards on both banks, especially in Côte-Rôtie, Hermitage, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, yield wines known the world over. To the west of the Rhône lies the Massif Central, a vast and ancient plateau of rugged hills, extinct volcanoes, and windswept plateaus. Geologically among the oldest parts of France, the Massif Central speaks of an ancient earth. Its volcanic cones, such as those in the Chaîne de Puys, are reminders of a primal world long before human settlement. This region, for much of history, was remote, inward-looking, and stubbornly independent. Even today, it retains an aura of self-sufficiency. It was here, in these central highlands, that resistance to central authority often found fertile ground, whether during the days of the Gauls, the religious wars of the 16th century, or even during the French Revolution. To the north, the land begins to mellow. The slopes roll more gently, the altitude drops, and the Massif Central gives way to the Paris Basin, the true heartland of France. This basin, shaped over millennia by rivers and glaciers, is a vast expanse of fertile farmland, gently undulating hills, and dense forests. It is a land of abundance, and from its bounty, power has long flowed. In this region lies Paris, the capital and the beating political, economic, and cultural heart of the nation. But it is not just Paris that makes this region vital. The Paris Basin, with its crisscrossing rivers, the Seine, the Marne, the Oise, and its rich soil, has always been a corridor of conquest and commerce. It connected Roman Gaul with the rest of the empire. It was fought over in the 100 Years' War. It fed armies, funded monarchies, and fueled revolutions. To the northeast, near the borders of Germany, Belgium, and Luxembourg, lies the region of Alsace and Lorraine, borderlands that have been the epicenter of Franco-German conflict for centuries. The geography here is subtle, but its historical weight is enormous. Rolling hills, fertile vineyards, and forested slopes form the backbone of the Vosges Mountains, which run roughly parallel to the Rhine River. These hills are not high, but they are steeped in history. The Rhine, flowing northward into Germany, has long been both a bridge and a battleground. At different times in history, these lands have spoken French, German, or a hybrid of both. Wars were fought not just for resources, but for cultural hegemony. To control this geography was to control identity. Move westward and you reach Normandy and Brittany, coastal provinces that gaze out across the English Channel. These are lands shaped by wind and water. Normandy, with its chalk cliffs and fertile fields, has long been a point of contact and conflict with England. From the Norman conquest in 1066 to the D-Day landings of 1944, its geography has invited both ambition and liberation. Brittany, further west, juts defiantly into the Atlantic. Here, the Celtic soul of France is most visible. Its granite coasts, storm-beaten lighthouses, and megalithic monuments speak of an ancient people who have long resisted assimilation. The rugged coastline is not merely picturesque, it is protective, insulating the region from the cultural pull of the center. As one travels south along the Atlantic coast, the land flattens into the Aquitaine Basin and the land is forest, a region once marshy and inhospitable, but transformed in the 19th century into one of Europe's largest man-made forests. South of here lies Bordeaux, a city synonymous with wine and commerce. The Rhône River, which flows through Bordeaux, joins the Dordogne to form the Gironde estuary, a maritime gateway through which goods and ideas have long flowed between France and the wider world. Further inland and southward lie the Pyrenees, the mountain range that forms a jagged border with Spain. Unlike the Alps, which are high and impassable in many areas, the Pyrenees are narrower and more isolated. They have acted as both a boundary and a buffer, preserving the cultural uniqueness of Basque Country, one of Europe's oldest and most enigmatic cultures. The Pyrenees have also played a vital role in history, offering both shelter and resistance, from smugglers to resistance fighters during World War II. The mountains here have long been a refuge for those who needed to escape the gaze of kings and armies. Finally, to the southeast lies Provence and the Mediterranean coast, a region bathed in sunlight, framed by lavender fields, olive groves, and the deep blue of the sea. This land has a different rhythm, a southern cadence that contrasts sharply with the grayer north. The Provençal landscape is gentler, warmer, more perfumed. It was here that the Greeks founded Massalia, modern-day Marseille, around 600 BC, making it France's oldest city. The Mediterranean climate shapes not just agriculture but architecture, cuisine, and temperament. And beyond Provence lies the Côte d'Azur, the French Riviera, where the Alps seem to plunge into the sea, creating dramatic cliffs, secluded coves, and some of the most prized real estate on earth. Long before the rise of Gaul, long before the shadow of Rome fell across the western reaches of Europe, the land we now call France bore silent witness to a much older, more mysterious tale, a tale not of kingdoms and crusades, but of stone and fire, of ritual and survival. Prehistoric France is not a story with names and dates, but one carved into cave walls, buried beneath ancient meadows, and etched into the DNA of the land itself. To step into the story of prehistoric France is to walk among shadows, shadows of peoples long vanished, yet still whispering through the soil, the stones, and the wind. The evidence of these earliest inhabitants begins over 1.8 million years ago, when early hominids, perhaps Homo erectus, first roamed the edges of what would become southern France. They were hunters and gatherers, following the migration patterns of animals, living in temporary shelters, and using rudimentary tools chipped from flint and quartz. Though little remains of these distant ancestors, their presence is known through scattered bones and hand axes, lying silent in places like Chilhac and Manasai. These people were not French, not even human as we know it, but they were the first to leave footprints in the dust of history here. As millennia passed and the Ice Age waxed and waned, new hominid species emerged. Around 400,000 years ago, Neanderthals began to appear across the European landscape, and France would become one of their strongholds. In the limestone valleys of the Dordogne, the caves of the Ardèche, and the rocky shelters of the Pyrenees, Neanderthals built a life. Their existence was harsh, marked by an unforgiving climate and constant movement, yet they thrived. In places like La Chapelle-aux-Saints, archaeologists have uncovered burials that suggest something deeply human, ceremonial rites, perhaps belief, or at least mourning. Neanderthals, often misunderstood, were not mere brutes. They used fire, created tools, and perhaps even shared a primitive form of language. And for hundreds of thousands of years, they were the sole masters of this land. Then, around 45,000 years ago, a new species arrived, Homo sapiens. They did not arrive as conquerors, but as wanderers, filtering into Europe from the east and south, coexisting for a time with the Neanderthals before eventually outlasting them. These modern humans would leave behind some of the most astonishing and enduring artifacts in the history of the world: the cave paintings of southern France. In the cave of Chauvet, discovered only in 1994 yet dating back over 32,000 years, the walls come alive with images of lions, rhinoceroses, mammoths, and bears, painted with such sophistication, depth, and movement that they rival the work of Renaissance masters. These were not mere decorations. They were portals into another world, a world of myth, of ceremony, of meaning far beyond survival. Further north, in the famed caves of Lascaux, discovered by accident in 1940 by a group of boys and a dog, the ceilings are adorned with painted herds, bison, horses, deer, flowing like waves across the limestone canvas. These paintings, nearly 20,000 years old, were created with pigment and purpose. Using charcoal, ochre, and iron oxide, artists worked by flickering firelight, guided by memory and vision. Some scholars believe the images were part of hunting rituals, others suggest they had spiritual significance. But all agree on one thing: this was art, and with it, humanity announced itself. Prehistoric France was not only home to artists, but to engineers and toolmakers. The Magdalenian culture, emerging around 17,000 years ago, crafted finely worked blades, harpoons, and needles from bone and antler. They adorned themselves with jewelry, carved figurines of animals and women, and buried their dead with care. Their lives revolved around the rhythms of nature, the migration of game, the turn of seasons, the constellations in the night sky. And yet, even in these distant times, we find echoes of our modern selves, the need to create, to understand, to belong. As the Ice Age came to a close, around 10,000 BC, the glaciers that once blanketed the Alps and the Massif Central began to retreat. The landscape softened. Rivers flowed more freely, forests spread across the valleys, and the great megafauna, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant deer, began to disappear. Human life changed with the land. This was the dawn of the Mesolithic period, an age of adaptation. In this new environment, people began to domesticate dogs, refine their tools, and live in semi-permanent settlements. Fishing and foraging became more sophisticated, and populations grew. Then, around 6000 BC, a revolution arrived, not with armies, but with seeds. Agriculture, born in the Fertile Crescent thousands of years earlier, made its slow but unstoppable way into France. The Neolithic period had begun. With it came new tools: polished stone axes, grinding stones, ceramic pots. People cleared forests to plant wheat and barley. They raised goats, sheep, and cattle. Villages appeared, first as scattered huts, then as communities with shared rituals and defenses. The land was no longer just a place to wander. It was a place to possess. In this Neolithic world, a profound transformation took root, not only in lifestyle, but in worldview. The dead were no longer simply buried in the earth. They were honored in monumental tombs. Across the western and northern regions of France, especially in Brittany, Normandy, and the Loire Valley, the landscape began to bristle with megaliths, giant stones set upright in sacred alignments. The most famous of these are the Karnak stones, a mysterious array of more than 3,000 standing stones stretching in rows across the countryside. Some believe they were aligned with celestial bodies, marking solstices or tracking lunar cycles. Others see them as territorial markers, or ceremonial paths. Whatever their purpose, they speak of a society deeply attuned to time, space, and memory.